Brothers and sisters in Christ, my acolytes who I've trained over the years know exactly what I did just now. Don't screw up, right? Yeah, don't screw up. I don't have a sermon. I might have a message. I might have a little bit of a conversation. But this is coming from help. I'm not doing this on my own. I've spent hours milling this over in my head. Weeks ago, when sabbatical was approaching, I told Carla and Denise, I've got a message. So it's been percolating for a long time, but I couldn't write it. So we're going to be a bit free-form. It's going to be probably a bit awkward. Sorry. The other thing I did not do is I did not talk to Pastor Mark. He does not know what I'm going to say. He does not endorse anything I'm saying necessarily. What's the disclaimer you see? All the words and actions are mine and mine alone. So don't hold it against him. And Pastor Stanky, if I go really off track, get the hook and give me a pull. In the 2008 presidential campaign, during the primaries, a commercial was run primarily in Texas, and it asked the question, who will answer the phone at 3 a.m.? Who's going to pick up that phone in an hour of crisis and respond? Now, that's great for politics. Who's going to answer the phone? Will they be the right person for the job? My personal opinion is if you're a politician, you're probably the wrong person for the job. But somebody has to answer that phone. Now, as I said, that was a commercial and it was great for political points. But from a personal perspective, I've been the person to answer the phone at 3 a.m. I spent 22 years in the Navy. The entire time I was in the medical field, and for the bulk of that, I was an independent duty corpsman. What that means is the ship, the crew, the Marines, and everyone embarked was my responsibility when it came to their medical care. My training was a year long, and the closest thing you can find is a little bit of a nurse practitioner, a little bit of PA, and then throw in some administrator, squeeze it together in a year, and go forth. Don't kill anybody. So for years, I carried the burden of answering the 3 o'clock call. When there was a knock on the berthing in the middle of the night, they were only looking for one person. I was up and I was responding to whatever the situation was. It was the best job I have ever held. It was also the one that wore me down the fastest. My wife and kids can attest. I loved being at sea. I loved being the doc. But the burden was heavy. And by the end of a 3-year tour, I was ready to lay that burden down. I was ready to pass it off to someone else. And I was ready to go do something else. I needed the break to recharge my batteries. I needed the break to remember what my family looked like, because at sea, I didn't see a lot of them. Most IDCs, when they did that job, they would take one platform, one ship that was their own responsibility, and as soon as they were done, they never looked back. I don't want that job again. I just want my next promotion because I did good. I did the job twice. And if you ask Karen, she'd probably tell you I'd do it a third time if I was asked. So I understand picking up the phone at 3, responding to crisis and having to be right. There aren't very many people who do that. But if you think about it, when we're in crisis, who gets the 3 o'clock phone call? Our pastor. He's the one who gives up his life for us. And not in a physical sense. It doesn't necessarily kill him. He's not in danger doing his job. But he's the one that carries it all. 7 days a week, 365 days a year. He can go on vacation and answer his phone and get the phone calls. And you know those 3 o'clock phone calls are never, Pastor, guess what? We had a baby. It's a bouncing baby girl. We're so happy. Those calls get held until a decent hour. Pastor Mark gets the call, or any pastor gets the call. There's a crisis. We need you at the hospital. We need you in your car and headed for Peoria or Chicago. Someone's days are coming to an end. It's not the fun, happy stuff that wakes you up in the middle of the night. But he gets up, as does any pastor, with a call, and those words are capitalized, a call, and he goes and responds and takes care of us. He has help, but he carries that burden himself. Anyone who has sat through a council meeting understands he won't give us his opinion very often. He wants us to make decisions. But at the same time, he has very firm ideas and beliefs and acts on them accordingly. So I guess the good news is I'm your last fill-in speaker. We've had some good ones. I get to follow some really good ones. Pastor Stanky, Pastor Chris. Maybe I'm just getting you ready to have our pastor back. The thing is, he needed a break. He needed to put it all down and walk away for a little while. And he didn't do a good job. He has snuck back in and checked on things. He got chased out again, but he's still keeping his fingers in the pot, but he walked away from us so that he can do a better job for us. Now, several months ago, a friend of mine who is a pastor, a classmate of mine who's a pastor, shared an article. And the article talked about the 25 reasons why a pastor leaves ministry. And as I read the article, I talked to Karen and I said, Mark, 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 Mark. And the list just kept going. And out of that 25 things, he probably had a good solid 20 that we could identify in him. And all of that added to the stress. All of that adds to his burden. And it is a burden he has accepted very willingly. I never question his will or his heart. I question a 100-hour week. Week after week after week. How many of you, when working, had days off? Pastor Mark has them scheduled. How many funerals happen on Fridays? Lots. Guess what Pastor Mark's day off is? And where is he on a day when he's supposed to be resting and recovering and getting away just a little bit? He is carrying that weight, that pain, and doing it willingly. Now, if you do any research, if you look online, there's lots and lots and lots of things that talk about why pastors leave ministry. I'm going to share a few. 90% of pastors report working between 55 and 75 hours a week. 70% say they feel underpaid. I'm not touching that. I'm just listing that. Most pastors feel unprepared or underprepared. Now, we've got the advantage of Pastor Mark, who's been around the block a couple of times. He didn't come to us brand new. But out of those leaving seminary, according to the statistics, only 1 in 5 make it 5 years. So I love Holly Grimm. I think she is wonderful. Her desires and her heart are leading her down a path. I hope she's successful because she's got many, many, many things to do in this world. 70% of pastors fight depression. And 50% feel so discouraged they would leave the ministry if they could. There are 1,700 or so pastors that leave the ministry every month. %80 of families believe that the pastoral ministry has negatively affected their family. 80% of spouses feel that the pastor is overworked and feel left out and underappreciated by church members. Many pastors are lonely. 70% don't have someone that they consider a close friend, and 40% report serious conflict with a parishioner at least once a month. And only 1 out of every 10 will actually retire as a minister. So the odds are stacked against a pastor who takes a call. A pastor who goes out, called by God, and comes to serve us. The numbers are stacked against him. I think everybody needs a break. And sabbatical is what is helping keep Pastor Mark with us. So I know a lot of people who have made comments about sabbatical, about he's gone again. It's 3 or 4 years later, and he's gone for a shorter period of time, but he comes back renewed. Does he have a stack of work waiting for him? Oh, you betcha. But he'll have the energy to do it. He actually has a tan, according to reports, so that means he's been out long enough to see the sun. Now, it wouldn't be a message without the Bible and without Scripture. And the passage I'm going to use comes from 1 Timothy. And it is a verse I do not believe I have ever heard Pastor Mark use in this format. I'm sure he knows it, but it's not something that he would ever say. I hold absolutely no position within this church. I'm not on council. I don't work here. I can say it. So if there's heat from this, please bring it. I'm more than willing to take it. From 1 Timothy. Pastors who do their work well should be paid well and should be highly appreciated, especially those who work hard at both preaching and teaching. For the Scriptures say, "Never tie up the mouth of the ox when it is treading out the grain. Let him eat as he goes along." And in another place, "Those who work deserve their pay." Don't listen to complaints against the pastor unless there are 2 or 3 witnesses to accuse him. If he has really sinned, then he should be rebuked in front of the whole church so that no one else will follow his example. In the same way, everyone knows how much good some pastors do. But sometimes their good deeds aren't known until long afterward. That was St. Paul writing to Timothy, who was trying to control and lead a rather rebellious church. So he gave him some rules to live by. And I think the important thing is, it's really, really easy to walk out into the back, to pick up the coffee, and mutter. I didn't like that. I didn't like that. I didn't. Okay. Everyone has their opinion. I don't like stuff either. Do you know what I do when I've got a problem? I go and talk to the pastor. I don't go in and say, "You did that wrong." I go in and say, "Why did you do it that way? Let me figure out what you were thinking." We had come back to town. We'd been away a long time. I barely knew Pastor Mark. We came to Easter service. Easter, the way I remember it. Lights, music, song, rejoicing. And we got taught a new song. We didn't do Easter the way I remembered it. That bothered me. Yes, I talk to my mom. Often I do. She talks to me a lot. I'm glad I'm not on council anymore. But it wasn't that much later that I went out and found Pastor Mark at Westwood. And we walked around and around and around the track. And I got to know Pastor Mark, and I understood what happened. And yes, there's still a disagreement, but we talked about it. And I didn't go to him and go, "You were wrong," without trying to figure out how to make it better and how to fix that. So my request of you is, as easy as it is to go back and have coffee and mutter, if it's a real complaint, it's not, we changed something, there was a kid running up and down the aisle, there was bad microphones, there was this, that, and the other thing. If it's something that really bothers you, talk to him. Talking to each other doesn't resolve it. It forms a boil, and the only way to treat a boil is to lance it. And that doesn't do any of us any good. So as we welcome our pastor back, you can say, thank God he has returned. Thank goodness we're done with these people who come up and yell at me, or who ramble, or who don't know what they're doing because they're not a pastor, Jigs. And if this is my last message to you, so be it. I think it was the right one. Amen.